Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today we are doing a book tag. So this is going to be the first video that you guys are going to see with my new setup, with my new bookshelves and so much natural lighting ahead of me. I don't think I've ever had natural lighting this good when I've been filming a video, and I feel like you can really see every detail of my skin. I am going to be doing a full video where I show you the new setup, the new bookshelves. I didn't film any of the process of me moving flat, packing up my books, unpacking my books, building these bookshelves, because honestly the whole thing was just very stressful anyway, and to add like a camera into the mix, I could not do it. But if you are too impatient to wait for a video where I'm showing off these beautiful shelves, you can head on over to my Bookstagram where I have posted some like full photos of the setup. Since this is the first video that we are filming in this new spot, I thought I would start with something like really simple and straightforward. So I'm going to be doing the in and out book tag, and I will leave the original creator link down below in the description so you can check out their original video. But this is just like, it's very much what it says on the tin kind of tag. Like, I'm going to say something and then I'm going to talk about whether it's in and I like it or it's out and I don't like it. Without further ado, let's get into it. The first of these prompts is reading the last page first. I don't understand why anyone would do this. So this is an out for me. Like, I don't understand. When I was much younger, I used to read the last sentence first. And again, I don't know why I did that. I didn't get anything out of that experience. I think I'm fortunate that I never really got spoiled. And I think there's rarely ever anything in the final sentence of a book that is going to spoil the whole book for you. Even on the last page, like, I feel like if you read the last page, you're missing so much context that like it might not spoil you for anything. Really, before the last page, the story is probably kind of wrapped up in terms of like the plot. But there are occasions where something major happens on the last page, or there's a massive spoiler on the last page. I don't understand why you would do this. You're letting an intrusive thought win. Stop it. Prompt number 2 is enemies to lovers. Now, I love me some romance fiction. Enemies to lovers is not my favorite. I mean, there are lots of books that I've really enjoyed that are enemies to lovers, but it's not the thing that just like really gets me going. Like, I can understand that like that tension, that competitiveness can like charge the sexual tension or whatever, but like starting a relationship from a place of conflict does not sound healthy to me. And I feel like in particular when there's enemies to lovers in a male-female romance, the boy is just mean and I don't want boys to be mean to girls. I want boys to be nice to girls. And I don't get like arguing with someone or disliking someone turning into fancying them. Like, I don't get it. I normally fancy people who are nice to me. I much prefer like a grumpy sunshine energy, or like one person falls first and the other person falls harder, and a meet cute. Like, that's what I like. And also sometimes with enemies to lovers, they don't even actually seem like they're enemies. They just like work in the same office. And I mean, that's an aside. Oh, if you have a romance that is set in an office, they work in the same place. No. I feel like I could probably do a whole video on like my feelings on romance tropes. So I'm gonna park that idea and swiftly move on to number 3, which is dream sequences. I'm actually struggling to think of a book off the top of my head that I've read recently that has a dream sequence in it. I think if it's super obvious that it's a dream sequence, like it's a contemporary novel and then suddenly there's like magical things happening, so you kind of immediately know that it's a dream, or there's something in like the typesetting, like it's in a different font so it's immediately clear that it's a dream sequence, then like I don't mind it. But if you're kind of deliberately tricked into thinking it's something that's actually happening and then you find out it's a dream, I don't think I like that. I'm sort of on the fence with this one, but I think overall, I'm gonna say out. Okay, we are back to romance tropes and love triangles. Yeah, I like a love triangle. It's got to be executed well, as any trope has to be. But yeah, I'm on board with a love triangle. I'm gonna say that's in. Cracked spines. I'm gonna say like a tentative in. So ideally, I would not like to have cracked spines. I do aesthetically enjoy a row of books spine out and the spines are all looking immaculate. But like if a spine does crack, like I'm not upset about it. And particularly a lot of my Penguin English Library collection, because I have sourced so many of those secondhand and a lot of them are like big chunky books. Some of them really have the spines cracked and like that's okay with me. Next up is back to your small town. This trope I love. I love a city gal going back to her small town. I just love. Next is monsters are regular people. I don't think I really understand what this trope is. Is this like more for your romantasy books, your like romantic fantasy books? Is that where you kind of find that trope? Like, I don't think I've experienced this enough to know if it's in or out. Next is no paragraph break. I hate this. Out. I'm really particular about kind of like typesetting and like how things in a book should be laid out. And when there are no paragraph breaks, that upsets me. I'm also a reader that is really motivated by like visual markers of progression. And if it's just like a wall of text with no paragraph breaks, that intimidates me. That puts me off. Also, because very often I'm reading while commuting, I find it beneficial to have like some natural pauses even in between chapters. Number 9 is multi-generational sagas. In theory, I don't have anything against this, but when I have read books that are like multi-generational, I have struggled. Just generally, if a book has lots of characters, my little brain can't keep up with loads and loads of people. There are exceptions to this, like a lot of Marion Keyes books have like multiple generations in them, but this is something that's kind of hit or miss for me. And if I had to like build my dream book, there probably wouldn't be like multi-generational elements to it. So I'm gonna say out. Number 10 is rereading. I never reread anything. The only sort of occasion that I tend to reread stuff is when I've read something at like manuscript stage in relation to the place that I work, and then the finished book comes out and I will reread it like very quickly. And that's only if it's a book that I've like absolutely loved that I will bother doing that. But other than that, I never reread. I would love to reread, but my TBR is just so huge. I have so many unread books that I just really struggle to justify rereading stuff when there are so many books on my shelves that I've yet to read. And I know that doesn't actually matter because like, whose time am I beholden to? Like, who is this person that's holding me accountable for reading the books that are on my shelves? It's just me. So if I would rather spend my time rereading, that's okay, but I just don't. And I don't think that's going to change until I manage to get my TBR down. 11 is artificial intelligence. And I'm guessing that means like artificial intelligence in books, not the use of artificial intelligence to create books. If it's the latter, then very much out. If it's like artificial intelligence having a role in like the story, I don't feel like I read enough sci-fi for that to really come up in my reading. I'm going to say out. Either way. Next is drop caps. So drop caps are that thing where there's like a big kind of more decorative first letter at the start of a chapter. I don't hate it, but I don't really like it either. Like, it doesn't actively bother me, but I just think it's a bit of like an old-timey kind of choice. Next is happy endings, and this is very much in for me. I like a happy ending. Or it doesn't even need to be happy, but I think like hopeful and optimistic. There are definitely lots of books that have had kind of very realistic, melancholic endings to them that I have loved, but I think, again, if I was building my dream book, it would have a happy ending. Next is plot points that only converge at the end. In theory, I think I like this, but I think like any of these things that we're talking about, it's on the condition that it's done well. I also feel like I don't read enough like mysteries for me to be coming up against this like very often. I do love that moment where there is some sort of like mystery element to a book and you figure it out like just before it's revealed. Like, I think that's when the author has completely nailed how they've set up the mystery, is when you figure it out just before it's revealed. I'm not one of those people that reads books and is like trying to figure out the mystery and like looking for clues. Like, I'm not really that actively engaged enough to do that. But yeah, if plot points only converging at the end gives me that moment where I'm like, oh, that's what's happening, then like, yeah, sure, that's it. I'm happy with that. Next is detailed magical systems. No. If it's a super detailed magical system that it's just essential, like the author is aware of it and the author is making sure that they're not breaking the rules that they've set up, then great. But if I actively need to remember the details of this magical system, it will go over my head. Don't task me with remembering things. Like, if there are pages and pages of a book that is explaining the intricacies of how this world and system is set up, I will zone out. You can have a super detailed magical system, but just don't expect me to remember what it is. Next is classic fantasy races. I'm not quite sure what this means. Does this mean like in Lord of the Rings when you have like the orcs and the elves? I don't read books like that, So I'm gonna say out. Next is unreliable narrators. And yes, absolutely love that. I eat that shit up. Because let's be honest, we are all unreliable narrators of our own story. If we were gonna tell people our life story, if we were gonna write our memoir, we would not be objective about it. We would all be unreliable narrators. I think being an unreliable narrator is what all narrators can kind of be. I love when you have a narrator and you're like, is that really how it happened though? And I know that that device can be used in much more like broader ways as well. I'm kind of thinking about it in just being like biased towards your own version of events, but it can also be used obviously to like deliberately withhold information from the reader and using it for like a major plot point. But either way, I love an unreliable narrator. Next is evil protagonists. And again, I feel like this is maybe like a fantasy thing, so I don't read as much of that. I love a morally grey protagonist. Like I love a flawed protagonist where like you don't always agree with their choices and what they're doing. I think evil's probably like a bit of a strong word, but I'm not against the protagonist being the bad guy. So I'm gonna say like a tentative in for this one. Next is The Chosen One, and again, I feel like this is kind of like a fantasy trope, but I read a fair bit of kids fantasy. Like I don't really read a lot of fantasy for adults, but I read a fair bit of kids fantasy, and I feel like The Chosen One comes up more in kids fantasy, and yeah, I'm on board with it. Yeah, this one's in. Next is When the Protagonist Dies, and this isn't something that I have read a lot of, but there is one book series that I have been reading where this happens, and I thought it was completely brilliant. So I'm gonna say this is in. Really long chapters can fuck off. This is absolutely out for me. Like I was saying about like paragraph breaks, I am often reading like when I'm on the move. So really long chapters is very annoying for me in those situations. And even just when I'm reading, like when I'm having a cozy reading evening, I find short chapters like really motivational to encourage me to keep reading. If it's a really long chapter, like I feel tired and daunted. So really long chapters is out. Next is French flaps. I quite like a flap. I don't think I have any like massively strong feelings towards French flaps. Like if they're there, I'll appreciate them and I'm like, ooh, fancy, there's a French flap. But at the same time, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, isn't that French flap beautiful? I'll be somewhere in between, but like, I'm not against it, so let's say that they're in. Next is deckled edges. I hate deckled edges. Get in the fucking bin. Next is signed copies by the author. Okay, so if I was given a toss-up, like you can have this book signed by the author or not have it signed by the author, I would obviously choose yes, I would like it to be signed by the author. However, I feel like working in publishing kind of ruins books being signed by the author because they just stop feeling special. Like when you've been there for the process of thousands of books being signed in a printer, you completely just like lose the magic and excitement of signed books existing. I think it's different like if you've gone to an event or you've met the author and it's a signed and dedicated copy, like I think that's different. That is something that is special. But if it's just in a bookstore and it's signed, I don't feel like the same draw to that I felt before I worked in publishing. I'm gonna tentatively say in for this one because, as I said, if I could choose to have a signed book or a not signed book, I would choose for it to be signed. The penultimate prompt is dog-earing pages. I think people assume that I would be really against dog-earing pages, and that is not the case. I quite often will dog-ear pages. I do have a collection of bookmarks, but it's pretty rare that I will actually remember to put one in my book and take it with me. I will quite happily dog-ear pages. It's kind of the same with the like cracking of the spine thing. Like and maybe this is a consequence of working in publishing as well, but I no longer really see books as these kind of precious objects that must be pristinely preserved. If you want to dog ear a page, man, just do it. It's your book. If you're using a library book or you've borrowed a book from someone, don't do that because it's not like your property to dog ear, but if it's your book, do what you want. And the final prompt is chapter titles instead of numbers. I like chapter titles instead of numbers. I think maybe ideally I would like them both there. Like chapter 2, the blah blah blah. I think that's my ideal, them both being there. But if it's an either or situation, I don't really mind what it is. I do think it's quite nice, especially in kids' books. I think kids' books always have like quite fun chapter titles. So yeah, I'm gonna say this one is in. So that's it. They are all of the prompts. Do leave me a comment down below if you would like to chat about anything that I have mentioned as part of this video. I feel like we got through like a lot of stuff. And as I was saying earlier, I feel like I could probably dedicate a whole video to talking about romance tropes. Let me know what you think of your first glimpse at the bookshelves. And if you want to let me know you're here, but you don't have anything in particular to say, can you leave me just one of the book emojis, like the stack of books or the open book, whatever. That is it for me today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will speak to you very soon.